Let's talk about Scion. So Toyota launched their Scion sub-brand in 2003 with the intention of targeting a younger demographic. Just 3 years later, in 2006, the Scion brand sold over 173,000 cars, and it looked to be a resounding success. To put it in context, that is in the same neighborhood as what the Dodge brand sold in the year 2023. But about a decade later, the Scion brand was dissolved and all of its models were either discontinued or rebadged as Toyotas. Now, we know that Toyota is the most successful automaker in the entire world, but they can be painfully slow to adopt new technology. And it seems like every move that Toyota makes is ultra calculated. So what happened with Scion? How did Toyota's successful side project deteriorate to a point where they decided it was best to just cut the brand altogether? That is what we are going to talk about today. We will start in the late 1990s. This was a time where Toyota was making a concerted push to sell to more younger buyers in the US market. And their lineup at the time included a whole suite of sports cars, including the Celica, the MR2, and the Supra. Now, admittedly, the Supra in particular was most likely going to be out of the price range of this demographic that Toyota was trying to target. And sports cars more broadly weren't super appealing to these younger buyers. But despite that, in 1999, Toyota launched Project Genesis. This involved bundling together the MR2, the Celica, and a compact economy car called the Echo, which in other markets was referred to as the Yaris. While there was really no change to the actual branding of these cars or to the product itself, they were marketed in a way that Toyota thought would better appeal to this younger demographic. What this essentially boiled down to was a hyped up advertising campaign that had a few spots of success, but overall was a failure for Toyota. But what Project Genesis did do is it taught Toyota if they really want to target this younger buyer, they really need to step into it. There really do need to be material differences between these cars and their Toyota siblings if they're gonna make any kind of impact. And to Toyota's credit, that is exactly what they did with Scion. In 2003, the Scion sub-brand was launched in California and would expand to the rest of the US in 2004. And if I really had to highlight what this brand is focused on, I would say there's two main points: affordability and customization. First, to talk about affordability and the reasons as to why Toyota decided to focus on that, I really think it kind of goes without saying. The younger buyers just don't have as much money to spend. But on the customization front, I think this is a little bit more interesting. I think we have to give a lot of credit to just the overall increase in interest in Japanese tuning culture that was happening in the early 2000s. The Fast and Furious was in full swing and Toyota was trying to cash in. Now, to talk about how this was actually implemented in practice, we'll swing back around to affordability. And the big thing to know about buying a Scion is that it was a haggle-free buying experience. Basically, when you walked into a Scion or Toyota dealer, you knew exactly the price that you were going to pay, and just overall, the sales process was a lot quicker and a lot smoother. Additionally, to help simplify the buying process, all of the cars were mono-spec, meaning that there were no trim levels to sort through, it was just the model, and this also helped keep prices down as well. But for those that were willing to spend a little bit more to have a car that is better personalized to them, Scion offered a massive parts catalog. This included things ranging from body kits to lowering springs to spoilers to aftermarket wheels. But opposed to being factory installed parts, these were customizations that were made once the cars landed on US soil. Next, to transition to the cars that were actually being sold by Scion at its launch, there were two different models. The first was the Scion XA, which in practice was basically a rebadged version of the predecessor to the Toyota Yaris. And this was the car that Toyota suspected would be the most popular Scion model. But it was actually the other car, the Scion XB, that would turn out to be a breakout success. The XB shared its platform with the XA, but it featured this super polarizing, ultra boxy styling. And although Scion was trying to target younger buyers with this car, kind of ironically, it would become extremely popular with senior citizens. As Scion expanded nationwide, they would end up adding another model in the form of the TC. The TC shared similarities to the other Scion models in that it was a compact car and it was affordable, but its differentiator was that it was intended to be a little bit sporty. And this basically just boils down to the TC being a two-door car and having a little bit more power than some of the other models, but I personally wouldn't go as far as to call this a real sports car. But my definition is pretty irrelevant here because the TC would go on to be Scion's best-selling model. Now, in these early years of Scion is when the brand would see its highest levels of success. In 2006, they would sell over 173,000 cars while just offering 3 different models, and this would be the company's best year ever. In subsequent years, Scion would continue to update their lineup, like when they replaced the XA with the XD in 2007. In 2011, they would kind of shift their naming convention to start with I's, and they launched the IQ, which was an ultra compact city car. When Toyota and Subaru partnered up to make an affordable sports car in the form of the BRZ and FRS twins, the Toyota side of that partnership was branded as a Scion. And in the last few years of Scion production, they would come out with the IM, which was essentially a rebadged Corolla hatchback, and the IA, which was essentially a rebadged Mazda 2. So I just mentioned that 2006 was Scion's best year for sales. So you might be able to infer from that every subsequent year was worse than 2006, and that would be true. After that high watermark, just 4 years later in 2010, they sold 47,000 cars, which is a decrease of 77%. Now, this is not necessarily all Scion's fault. In 2008, there was a massive global financial crisis that just resulted in an overall decrease in demand for consumer goods. And for most people, buying a new car is only something you're going to do if you feel that you are in a stable financial position. But to be completely transparent here, the decrease in Scion sales started before this, and while the financial crisis certainly didn't help, it wasn't the root cause of Scion's problems. The decline really started in 2007, and you can see the decline for the Great Recession, but after that, their sales numbers never really rebounded to the point that they were previously, like every other automaker. By 2013, the end was in sight for Scion. Toyota was allowing their dealerships to drop the Scion brand without any penalty as just sales continued to plummet. This was also around the same time when Scion launched the FRS, which did have some early success, but in practice, this car was cannibalizing sales from the TC because essentially both of these cars were targeted at the budget-focused sports car buyer. Ultimately, in 2016, Toyota announced that the Scion brand was going to be absorbed back into Toyota, and all of the Scion models were either going to be discontinued or would be rebadged as Toyotas. And the rationale that Toyota provided is that they simply didn't need the Scion brand anymore to target the younger demographic. So now let's kind of examine what caused the failure of Scion. And if I had to boil down the reasons behind Scion's failure into just a few points, the first point I would raise is just that Scion misread what the younger consumer actually wants. And the second reason was just a failure to invest in the products themselves. One bright spot for Scion, though, was the way they configured their models, having them all mono-spec, and the haggle-free buying experience. These are legitimately good ideas that we have seen other automakers pick up on. But the big focus on customization through dealer-installed parts was a little bit of a miss. It's just super rare to find a buyer who wants a bare-bones economy car, but is then willing to spend thousands of dollars in overpriced dealer-installed parts. And if we take a look at the models that were the most successful for Scion, they would be the XB and the TC. Both of these vehicles offered something unique. The XB had this kind of bizarre styling that paid homage to vehicles that are only sold in the Japanese domestic market, while still being incredibly usable and practical and featuring an ultra-reliable Toyota powertrain. The TC, on the other hand, was offering a sporty driving experience and more aggressive styling compared to something like a two-door Honda Civic. And in addition to the factors that I just laid out, the other thing that made the XB and the TC so successful was just that they were incredible bargains. And at Scion's best, this is what the brand was. They sold unique, fun, and affordable cars. But outside of these two models, the rest of Scion's lineup just really didn't do this. The XA and XD were nearly identical to their Toyota siblings with just like slightly different bodywork. The IQ entered into a segment that has never really seen sustained mainstream success in the US market. And lastly, the i8 and the IM were pretty clearly just rebadged versions of other cars, and there was really nothing that made them discernible as a Scion. And what this all boils down to is just a failure to invest and adapt and change the Scion brand by Toyota after the financial crisis. Now, before we close this video out, I just want to do a quick little thought experiment. If Toyota was going to bring the Scion brand back today in 2024 with the intent to target this younger demographic, what are some things that would make this brand successful? I first think we can learn from Scion's past and lean into vehicles that feature fun and unique designs. A design language that has proven to be ultra successful as of late is kind of what I would describe as retro-futuristic. I'm specifically looking at vehicles like the Ford Bronco or a recent concept by Hyundai, the Envision 74. Now, price and affordability is always going to be a factor here, so these cars are going to have to be priced at the low end of the car market. But with that being said, what we do kind of focus on with our limited resources is still very important. With the quality of interior plastics that are being used in cars today, I don't think you're going to have to spend a ton of money making a nice interior. The place you really need to invest is with technology and specifically smartphone integration. I truly believe that a good digital display and a big, high-quality infotainment system is probably one of the best ways to sell cars to young buyers.